December 7, 1941, was a day like any other, but beneath the calm surface lay the tension of a world at war. The rising sun bathed the Hawaiian Islands, and at Pearl Harbor, soldiers and sailors began their routines unaware of what was approaching. The United States had managed to stay out of the chaos engulfing Europe and Asia, but for how long could they avoid the inevitable? Across the Pacific, a fleet of Japanese aircraft carriers moved silently, preparing for a strike that would change everything. It was an operation steeped in secrecy, aimed at crippling the U.S. Pacific Fleet and securing dominance in the region. As American personnel raised flags over Pearl Harbor that morning, Japanese pilots readied themselves, fully committed to their mission. The people of Oahu, the ships in the harbor, and the families at home had no warning of the horror about to unfold. They were on the precipice of a moment that would shatter any illusions of American invincibility. As engines roared to life, and planes took off from Japanese decks, fate had already decided what was to come. In the next hour, Pearl Harbor would be plunged into a maelstrom of fire, chaos, and history. This is the story of how one attack forever changed the course of a nation. Rising tensions, the road to Pearl Harbor. The attack on Pearl Harbor did not happen in a vacuum. It was the culmination of years of tension between the United States and Japan. The 1930s saw Japan increasingly aggressive in its expansion, seeking new resources and territory throughout East Asia. As Japan moved into China and beyond, the United States viewed these actions with growing concern. Diplomatic efforts to curb Japanese ambitions were in vain, as negotiations gave way to threats and economic sanctions. The United States imposed strict embargoes on vital materials, including oil, hoping to choke off Japan's military expansion. For the Japanese, the embargoes were not just obstacles but existential threats to their future as a regional power. Japan's leaders faced a choice: either back down or confront the Western powers in a fight for survival. The decision to strike Pearl Harbor was born out of desperation and the belief that a swift blow could neutralize American interference. In October 1941, Hideki Tojo became Japan's prime minister, and any hope for peace all but vanished. Tojo was determined to secure Japan's imperial ambitions at any cost, even if it meant taking on the United States. A daring plan was developed, led by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, who understood both the danger and necessity of attacking Pearl Harbor. The risk was immense, but if successful, Japan could dominate the Pacific without interference. The Japanese fleet set sail in late November, their destination known only to a handful of top commanders. Maintaining total radio silence, they headed east across the vast Pacific, aiming to reach striking distance without detection. The plan depended on the element of surprise, an element they would manage to keep until the very last moment. Meanwhile, in Washington, efforts at negotiation continued, but the talks were a mere facade. Across Pearl Harbor, life went on, with many assuming that any threat from Japan was thousands of miles away. American military leaders underestimated the danger posed by the Japanese Navy. The quiet preparations of Japanese pilots on their carriers contrasted sharply with the complacency in Hawaii. The world stood on the edge of a precipice, oblivious to the approaching storm. December 7, 1941. The surprise attack unfolds. The morning sky filled with an ominous drone as Japanese fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes closed in on Oahu. With the sun rising behind them, the pilots had the advantage of surprise and visibility. At 7:48 a.m., the first wave of attackers broke through the Hawaiian clouds and began their assault on Pearl Harbor. The sailors and soldiers stationed there had only moments to react, and confusion quickly turned into terror. The first target was Battleship Row, where iconic vessels like the USS Arizona lay docked. Torpedoes sliced through the water, and bombs rained down, striking ships with pinpoint accuracy. The USS Arizona suffered a catastrophic explosion, killing over 1,000 men in an instant. Flames and smoke filled the harbor as explosions erupted across the base, leaving destruction in their wake. Despite the chaos, many servicemen acted with remarkable speed and bravery, rushing to mount a defense against the onslaught. Anti-aircraft guns sprang to life, sending tracer rounds skyward in a desperate attempt to fend off the relentless attackers. The harbor was a scene of bedlam, with ships listing, planes in flames, and people scrambling for cover. The attack was swift and brutal, a perfectly orchestrated strike that left Pearl Harbor in ruins. As the second wave arrived, the devastation only deepened, targeting airfields and infrastructure to ensure American forces would be unable to respond. Pearl Harbor's aircraft were destroyed on the ground, row after row of them burning, unable to lift off. The meticulous planning of the Japanese paid off, and in less than 2 hours, the damage was done. For the US, the attack felt like a bolt from the blue, a nightmare unfolding in broad daylight. By 10 a.m., the last of the Japanese planes were retreating back to their carriers, leaving behind a harbor engulfed in flames and smoke. The once proud Pacific Fleet lay in tatters, and the toll on human life was staggering. Over 2,400 Americans had been killed, and the loss of ships and planes was enormous. The audacious surprise attack had succeeded beyond Japan's expectations, but it would come at an unimaginable cost for them in the years to come. Heroes and Chaos, Stories of Bravery and Survival. Amidst the horror of Pearl Harbor, there were countless acts of bravery that still echo through history. Sailors like Doris Miller, an African-American mess attendant, took up arms and defended their comrades despite not being trained for combat. Miller's actions, firing anti-aircraft guns and saving fellow crewmen, made him one of the attack's most celebrated heroes. His courage was a testament to the spirit of those who fought back that day, regardless of the odds. Navy divers plunged into the oily, debris-filled waters in the hours after the attack, searching for survivors trapped in the hulls of capsized ships. These men faced incredible dangers, including toxic fumes and the risk of entrapment, yet their determination to rescue those still alive was relentless. The cries for help from inside the overturned USS Oklahoma drove them to push their limits. Despite the peril, they managed to save dozens of men who had been left for dead. Medical personnel also showed immense bravery, setting up makeshift aid stations to treat the overwhelming number of wounded. Doctors and nurses worked tirelessly, often under fire, to save as many lives as possible. Supplies ran out quickly, but improvisation and sheer will kept the aid efforts going. The resilience of those treating the wounded was just as heroic as those who had taken up arms against the attackers. Civilians, too, played a crucial role, rushing to the base to help however they could, bringing supplies, and assisting in any way possible. Their involvement highlighted the unity that emerged in response to the tragedy. The sense of shock and disbelief quickly gave way to an unbreakable determination to stand together. In the face of such destruction, the people of Oahu showed a spirit that could not be broken. The attack on Pearl Harbor left scars, but it also forged legends of heroism and sacrifice. The wreckage of the USS Arizona, still smoldering, became a symbol of American resilience. The courage displayed by so many that day helped to inspire a nation stunned by the sudden assault. These stories of bravery provided a rallying cry, and in the aftermath, the resolve to fight back became unshakable. Aftermath. A nation transformed. The attack on Pearl Harbor shocked the United States and the world, prompting an immediate response from President Franklin D. Roosevelt. On December 8, he addressed Congress, declaring the previous day as a date which will live in infamy. His powerful words galvanized the American people, and Congress quickly declared war on Japan. The sleeping giant had been awakened, and the United States was now fully committed to World War II. Across the country, men lined up to enlist, driven by a mix of anger, patriotism, and a desire for justice. The unity that followed Pearl Harbor was unprecedented, with people from all walks of life stepping up to support the war effort. Women entered the workforce in droves, filling roles left vacant by men who had gone to fight. Factories switched to war production, and a nation once reluctant to engage in global conflict was now united in its purpose. However, not all consequences of the attack were heroic or just. Fear and suspicion led to the internment of Japanese Americans, a dark chapter in American history. Families were uprooted and sent to camps, stripped of their rights in the name of national security. It was a sobering reminder of how fear can lead to the suspension of civil liberties, even in a country built on freedom. The U.S. military also underwent a rapid transformation, with Pearl Harbor serving as a stark lesson in preparedness. Shipyards and factories worked around the clock to rebuild the Pacific Fleet and produce the weapons needed to fight a global war. The resilience and industrial power of the United States became evident as the country mobilized for total war. The Japanese had hoped to demoralize America, but instead, they had ignited a fierce determination. In the months following Pearl Harbor, the United States began striking back, turning the tide in the Pacific. Key battles, such as Midway and Guadalcanal, showcased American resolve and ingenuity. The journey from the devastation of Pearl Harbor to victory would be long and costly. But the attack had lit a fire that would ultimately lead to Japan's defeat and reshape the global order. Today, Pearl Harbor stands as a solemn reminder of the cost of complacency and the resilience of a nation in the face of adversity. The USS Arizona Memorial marks the final resting place of those who lost their lives, a haunting symbol of sacrifice and remembrance. The attack not only drew the United States into World War II but also transformed it into a global power. The stories of bravery, sacrifice, and unity born from that day still inspire and resonate across generations. The events of December 7, 1941, serve as a powerful lesson about the dangers of underestimating one's enemies and the power of unity in response to tragedy. For those who lived through it, the memories of that day remain vivid, forever etched in their hearts. And for all of us, Pearl Harbor is more than just a historical event, it is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As we remember, we are called to honor those who sacrificed, ensuring that such a day is never forgotten. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment if you enjoyed the content and see you in our next video.